Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this month's Knowledge Marketing webinar focused on how audience data helps conquer the Media RFP. My name is Brett Kierstead. I'm Senior Vice President of Sales and Operations for Knowledge Marketing and the monthly host for our continuing series aimed at providing new and hopefully clever ideas to publishers, media companies, and associations that we service every day through our technologies and through our strategies. I'll be recording today's session, so those of you that want to pass it along to other people can do so. Also, you'll get a follow-up with an opportunity to request the handouts if you'd like them as well. Also, if you have questions along the way, please feel free to submit them through the GoToWebinar dialog box. And if you would keep your ears open, because here in a minute we're also going to do a quick little poll to get you guys engaged with the content. For those of you that are new to our webinar series, we do these every month and have been doing them for close to 4 years now. So we've had a lot of great feedback and want to continue to provide you guys with ideas to hopefully, charge you up in the middle of your week towards, in this case particularly, tackling a very familiar foe, which is the Media RFP. So for those of you that are new to knowledge marketing, we focus on providing technologies and services, as I mentioned, to media companies and publishers around audience data unification, new strategies around email, circulation management. We're also spending a lot of time capturing behavioral engagement with content, which you'll see during today's discussion, as well as near and dear to my heart, helping empower media sales success. So we're glad to have you here. We service some great customers, and it's these customers that are kind of raw materials for these webinars. We exchange different ideas and training and conversations around strategy, and we try to take those ideas and bring them out to you and give you a chance to improve the way you do things. So we're blessed to have them as customers, and look forward to continuing to use some of the ideas to improve the way everyone in this industry tackles common issues. All right, so here's my poll. Again, today we're talking about the Media RFP. Okay, and so the Media RFP is the following question that I have for you. So more often than not, when you encounter an RFP, do you think of it as 1, a request for proposal, 2, a recipe for pleasure, or 3, a royal friggin' pain? So those are your 3 RFP questions, and I'd be curious if you wouldn't mind how, when you get them, what your kind of common thought process. So I'll give you a minute to answer them and then get you in the mindset of what we're talking about here, because we all get them and we all have a reaction typically when we do. So I'll give you 5 more seconds. And that's good. A lot of votes in here. So let me see. I'll share the results with you here on the screen. Unfortunately, no one saw this as a recipe for pleasure, which is good. That's probably why you're here. But I am encouraged that a lot of you do see this as a request for a proposal. In other words, there's a lot of you, maybe 30%, that think of it as a pain, and certainly some of them can be. And I've shown you my research to why I agree. But hopefully, we can come up with some clever ideas. So unfortunately, maybe at the end of the day, we'll convert one of you to consider RFPs a recipe for proposal, a recipe for pleasure. Okay, so let's keep moving on. So I had a great feedback from my friend, since a lot of us don't like it. If you guys know Joe DeAndrea from North Star, he sent me some feedback, and he said he wanted to start this trending hashtag called #DeathToGenericAgency RFP. So if we can post that out on Twitter, maybe we'll trend globally about the death to the agency RFP. And I do like the point about being generic, because a lot of the ones that I see would have seen in my research and time in going through this shows me why a lot of you might have angst over doing it. So as preparation for this, to give you guys some useful content today, I had requested RFP samples, recent ones, from 8 clients of ours responded. I got about 25 different examples. 14 of them actually had some completed version, meaning some of them were redacted, some of them have completed versions. They submitted by and for manufacturers, associations, service businesses that were positioning out to you a request for you to propose some advertising opportunities. Some of them came through big agencies, Weber Shandwick and Fallon, or maybe some other smaller entities. And really, the publishing clients on our side that got them were from very diverse verticals in B2B. So I think I got a pretty good sample size, a good group, a lot of commonality, and so hopefully that's the raw materials that I use to give you guys your insight for today. And here's some of the things I saw, and if this makes you feel cringeworthy, great, but if you're like, oh good, other people are putting up with what I'm put up with, that's great, but I want to make sure you can understand the perspective of what my research showed. So here was an example. I've redacted a lot of stuff from this just so that you can't identify who it came from, but it's a very common look. Here's Weber Shandwick, one of the top organizations in agencies out there, and they issue a spreadsheet with ugly green colors that have various different questions around here that are very, very rote, very simplistic, about simple yes/no answers. There was a lot of these things that showed up, these little Excel spreadsheets where all you do is you just fill in some basic information, even old, kind of what I would consider legacy requests about, click-through rates or page views. I mean, things that are metrics, but they're just not current with a lot of things that people are doing. There were a lot of these, fill in the blanks, yes, no, with no real opportunity for you to provide distinction or differentiation. There was a lot of these little calendars, like give me your calendar, your production calendar. Feel free to add or remove rows, to really make it real personal. There was a few of these continuing use of the words blasting. Do you blast? Do you offer e-blast? How much do you blast people? Blah, 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 or even questions about gross reach or CPM, kind of these traditional questions that you're seeing over and over again. And I have to admit, some of it I thought, I had hoped that we had evolved beyond this, but obviously these continued to be a common theme. There were a lot of these templated requests around metrics, do you perform performance metrics? What other ones do you have? Can you do third-party ads? I mean, some of this stuff is very routine, very simplistic, but kept showing up and across multiple different requests. And then this one, I'm sure you all love this one, added value, which is a clever way of saying, give me a bunch of free stuff, which obviously you're expected to reply to and provide some insight into or provide some value for or provide a response to. But it was funny how it just kept showing up, and even in something as simplistic as this of a request with an open question or some spreadsheets that we had to work from. So, my summary of findings, and I hope this doesn't sound offensive, but most of these suck. I mean, they're just not, they didn't provide to you a whole lot of original thought. And I can understand why the anxiety what people would have about them as they existed in their core format, because it seemed like a lot of them, as you know, are very templatized. Unfortunately, and I will say this on the other side, a lot of the responses seem like they were mailed in. And as a sales professional myself, I never like to see that. I like to see, even in the worst of RFPs, some ingenuity and creativity in response, but a lot of them to me felt like even the responses were mailed in. So we have kind of an unoriginal document going out with unoriginal responses. It's clear to me that the sender of a lot of these RFPs was either uneducated, lazy, or doesn't really care about the value you can provide. Meaning, as a publishing media company with all the diversity and all the talent and information and content and channels you have, it doesn't seem like a lot of these folks are really digging to find the value there. Now, granted, there is some logic to templates. I mean, it helps, especially in some very specified examples, to have like consistency across multiple vendors, especially for pricing and maybe some procedural aspects of what's necessary in conducting a campaign. But it just seems like that was the dominant piece of it, as opposed to it being, something that was maybe a companion to the real value add that you can bring. However, on the bright side, if you're ingenious and you take your time, and this is what we're going to focus on today, I think there are some opportunities for you guys to find points of differentiation. You may just have to look hard about it. And we'll talk a little bit about that. Also, in addition, a lot of the advice I got from some of our customers was to be really thoughtful about the companion documents you provide to your answers. The RFP, most of them had a lot of as we showed, a very specific set of things to respond to. But if you did have the opportunity to position additional documents, whether it's through a cover letter or an attached PDF or your media kit, pairing up those with some strategic opportunities within your RFP is a good combination. And the last one that I've come to realize too in these conversations and research is you're going to need pictures to tell your story. And I will tell you why that is so when we get into this in a little bit more detail about some strategies. But the idea of data and the idea of the value proposition that you bring to the table as an integrated and diversified media company in many ways is still abstract. People still traditional agencies might still see you as a traditional publisher. Number two, a lot of the agencies themselves, they might have had turnover and they have maybe a new type of buyer that doesn't quite understand your industry, and maybe they're looking for new buzzwords, or there's an opportunity, there's an education process if you're going to convince them that you have value beyond what they know you as. And I'm afraid that in the early stages, many people will learn who you are through images and pictures as opposed to words. Okay, so that's kind of what my general findings are. And now let's get into some things that I want to kind of focus on today as we hopefully give you some creative ideas from a sales response to these RFPs. First of all, I've preached this many times. I've done sessions on this. We've created training events, not just for our customers, but also through partnerships with NAPCO and the different industry events, is that sales and the conversation that's going on between you and your agencies and you and your customers is evolving. We as an industry are trying to become more strategic. We're trying to present to our legacy buyers that we're more than just an ad. We're more than just space on a page. We're more than just a banner ad. We've got significantly compelling value to bring that's beyond what we've ever had, and that comes from a better selling methodology. And so a lot of you are out there talking about different ideas. I love the challenger sale. I think that's a good methodology. The idea of taking control of the customer conversation is something that's critical when dealing with an RFP. Secondarily, there's other training methods. If you follow Drew Davis, he's got some cool ideas. There's a lot out there to subscribe to. So I encourage you, in addition to this webinar and the ideas on here, to go out and do your research on different techniques from how to take control of the customer conversation. Okay, let's look in the RFP. So when you're reading an RFP, my advice to you is as follows. Look throughout the RFP for the gold nuggets of opportunity. So those openings in it, when they're not asking you, how many subscribers you have, but they're giving you an opportunity to provide some differentiated methods. So there's usually keywords and requests in there that you might gloss over, but yet the agency has provided you, or the buyer themselves has provided you with an opportunity to provide points of differentiation. And ultimately, you want to use them to set up future discussions and positioning. Okay, so here's some examples of some paragraphs that I pulled out of different RFPs that can give you some insight if you read them with intent. Okay, so for example, one said, we would like to explore opportunities beyond the printed page. Can you please complete the chart below and highlight ideas and recommendations for our client? Okay, so here's an example of an opportunity within a document that is opening up a simple, kind of benign RFP that you might have glossed over, that's providing you with the opportunity to discuss what you do beyond the printed page. Okay? Second one, market positioning is key to our client's overall strategy. Therefore, our partner selection will rely heavily on their insights and influence in our industry, our particular industry, whatever it might be. So again, here's another example where you can provide differentiation. The last one, is kind of on this page, is a long one, but it says things like, based on a combined investment, right? So they're giving you things of saying, hey, we're open to the idea of multi-channel or omni-channel or investing with you across different areas. So make sure that when you reply and you respond, you pick up on these words and use them to your advantage. Another one that I see commonly, and a lot of you were expressing, or a lot of have seen, is the idea about identify, segment, and target. So, you know, our solutions, this was one, like kind of an opening statement, like our solutions are most impactful for a very specific subset of the market. So how well you can identify, segment, and target our niche will be critical. Okay, we are looking for lead profile data that extends beyond what is publicly available for purchase. You know, our goal is to target individuals beyond their BPA subscription data based on behavioral and contextual interests. So guys, if you're taking your time and you're looking for these are the foundations for building blocks for a more clever and thoughtful RFP response, where you can use some of the data and intelligence that you've collected on your audience that would distinguish you from a lot of other sources. You know, today, and we'll talk a little bit about this competitively, a lot of you are being threatened potentially by investments in online sources, you know, LinkedIn or Facebook or these social channels or all this hype around what these tools can be. But if you really think about it, there's significant amount of ammunition and power that you have in your own data, the history of information, the quality of data through audits, the amount of information that you have provides you with a distinct advantage. But if you can't represent it and you can't get the opportunity to present it, you're never going to be able to provide that differentiation. So all of these sentences, if you're not looking for them, you might just gloss over them, put in your answers, and then move on. But you miss a golden opportunity to start laying the foundation for an argument. Okay, so here's another one, like even in a spreadsheet like this where they list a bunch of stuff, in the middle of it, they give you an opportunity to provide anecdotal insights. You know, and again, we might be like, oh, you know, we have 50,000 people, or our add-ed ratio is this, or geographic is this, and we might sometimes miss over these open opportunities. So keep your eyes open for them. Here's another one. It's a template, you know, it's asking, you know, please provide a general overview of your target reach and demographics. Well, here's the compelling question. Also, your unique capabilities and any other differentiating factors from the competition. Again, I'm not saying that they're going to see that, read that, fall to their knees, send you a check, but what you're trying to do, guys, is to establish opportunities for differentiation, sometimes amongst a sea of basic questions where your data and insight can provide you with an advantage. Okay, so I like to think of it this way. Opportunity knocks, we just showed you a bunch of them, and here's how data can help you answer. So let's talk about 5 of the things that we just talked about, right? We said somebody had asked in these RFPs, here's 5 examples, and again, you can go back and reread your RFPs and probably find 100 of these things if you really take the time to look for it, but I'm pulling out the ones that we talked about before. So a request for move me beyond the printed page, or number 2 was help me with market positioning, industry insights, and influence. Another one was explain your ability to do targeting and segmentation, or we want more on our leads than anybody else. And lastly, we can't wait to see your freebies, your added value, and how can you do something more creatively. So these are common things that you might see, and let's take them one by one. Okay, so let's talk about data as an asset. You know, data is not always the salesperson's best friend. We sometimes tend to get eyes gloss over, or the marketing person just, we don't necessarily think of it this way, but let me give you a good way to think about data, and hopefully a way that's not intimidating. I think of two types of data. One piece of data is something that answers a question. There's other data that tells a differentiation story, okay? Data that answers a question, and a lot of you spend your time doing this, is things like how many subscribers do you have to your magazine? And you say 40,000 or whatever the number is, or whatever it might be. How many website impressions, or how many this, or how much that, or what percentage of this? That's data, but to me it's really a closed-ended response. You're basically providing a piece of data without a story behind it. To me, the data that we want to think about is also data that not only is a piece of information, but it also might tell a story. So for example, data that tells a story to say the most frequent topic clicked on by our readers in our newsletters and on our website is engineering. Okay, so the reason why that tells a story is you can explain how people have gotten there, how you track that, how you've measured it, the components of it. It's a little bit unique. It's compelling. It's something different than a number. There's an opportunity for you to tell a story. Now, granted, you could tell a story about your 40,000 magazine subscribers too, but most people look at that and move on without really thinking through it. But there's other pieces of data that tell some kind of story that's unique and compelling to you. Okay? From a publisher perspective, so we're going to focus on those data elements and how you arrive at them. Many of you have gone through this exercise as an organization. Companies like Knowledge Marketing and others, many of them out there can help you organize this stuff. And your data that you collect usually comes from multiple areas, your demographics, your behaviors, your contextual information. It combines together into a unified asset that you can use to sell. And so that data allows you that foundation to provide these points of differentiation. Okay, so let's go through them. Number one, the request about moving me beyond print. Hopefully a lot of you get asked this, or you're even proactively talking about how you want to do it, and I'll show you an example, an illustration of a couple of customers of ours, kind of how they might position it. So, for example, if you think about your audience universe, again, imagine pictures, right? Trying to describe how your different data sources interact together in words is hard, but in pictures, it's kind of nice. Our great friends up at Chief Executive Group up in New York, Marshall and the team, have a really diverse set of audience products and ways to satisfy any RFP or marketing or advertising request. And the presentation of these as individual sources that can combine into a marketing strategy or a single data profile is very compelling. It shows that they have an understanding of moving beyond print because the advertiser may not have realized all the disparate sources and different opportunities you have to do it, but sometimes the picture makes it a little bit easier. And so this representation of the diverse channels that you might have, the unification of your data, the ability to present a single view can provide a compelling foundation for the request to move beyond print. If you guys know Rhonda Hughes and the folks at UBM and her new formerly Advanced Star group, they do a great job of this visual through representing their audience universe as a unified tool. It's a unified ability for moving an advertiser beyond print because their engagement with their users across multiple different content channels is very easy to see. So when Rhonda and the team talk about CAST, in the pharmaceutical space, they have the opportunity to differentiate themselves as the most comprehensive data source and advertising for people that want to engage people in that industry across all channels. So their visual representation makes it easy to see why they have access to help an advertiser that wants to do something other than print. Okay? Secondarily, another area that's really critical, again, visually to do it is when you can explain, a lot of our customers that go out on sales calls incorporate in some of these visual images about explaining the uniqueness of how users engage and subscribe to content. And what I mean by that is a lot of people will say, well, no one in such and such industry reads the magazine anymore. They're all online. Or vice versa. Oh, everybody reads the magazine. Our audience hasn't moved online, and we still want that single source. Well, the challenge is convincing somebody that that's not true. So data, visuals, and representation of that can help you that by showing the overlaps, the intersections, people that engage you single-channel, multi-channel, and your knowledge and experience of the data provides them with the confidence that you understand in your RFP and on your recommendations where they should be advertising. Okay, so this is just an example of someone proactively saying we want to move beyond print and using data, visuals, and representations to convince them that you're the choice to do so. Okay, the second one is this concept around market positioning influence. If you remember, the objection was, or the opportunity in the middle of the RFP was, we're interested, our client is interested in improving their market positioning and influence, and so how can you prove that you're of value? Well, one of our examples is a customer of ours that does a really good job of positioning themselves as an industry leader. So TMB Publishing is a small publisher out of Chicago. area. They're a fun group of people. They really focus on a niche industry called PHCP, so it's like plumbing, heating, cooling products, that industry, and they position themselves as an industry leader. And a lot of you do this, and then you forget the opportunity that exists within your responses and your marketing to reinforce that. So they talk about being the #1 brand for unified audience, unified marketing in the industry. They talk about being an audience leader. They talk about being unification of data. There's a whole bunch of areas that they go at of aligning themselves with an industry and therefore their advertiser with the industry as well. A positioning idea that I heard someone say, and this wasn't TMB, but they're great and maybe they'll pick it up, was just the idea that if you think about what LinkedIn is a community for a particular industry, for the kind of the global industry about networking and whatever you want to use it for. If you think about what you bring to the table in your particular vertical market, you could make the argument, as I have many times, that you're much like LinkedIn. You have a list of people, you set up networking events, you provide content, you link people together through online interactions or through live events. You have the ability to position yourself as a connector within the industry in your responses, and then turn around to an advertiser and say, we are the default source for connecting together the right people and the right content within an industry. So again, when you're replying, you think about data, you think about your connection ability, you think about your positioning, make sure that you're taking those kinds of statements and following it along with something maybe as unique as this, which enhances your industry expertise. Okay, let's talk about door number 3, which is targeting and segmentation. So, the funnel idea, and historically, a lot of media companies have been seen, especially in one of two areas, primarily volume driven. It's either how many subscribers, how many people can I blast, or how many impressions do I get on the website, right? So the ability to get large numbers in a particular industry has been a lot of our strategy. And so when you go back and you look at that RFP, a lot of those questions were aimed at trying to get you to just put the largest number possible. But that's not necessarily a differentiation strategy, and some agencies, to their credit, are starting to ask for targeting and segmentation capabilities. So a good idea or a good way to think about it is, targeting across different elements of data that you can collect. Demographic data might be a large list of qualified prospects that get honed in on based on some of their behavioral activities and their contextual interests. Your ability to demonstrate this as a, kind of an attachment or an inclusion within an RFP shows your understanding of targeting and segmentation. Geographic segmentation is an area. Again, if you think about purely online sources, a lot of them may not have that kind of data. You've collected a lot of that information through their magazine subscriptions and through other, more dense products that allow for a deeper data collection. So geographic segmentation and the visual representation of audience in a geographic space could be another value add to an RFP. Again, who's somebody who wants to understand that capability. Maybe the localized campaigns, regional product promotion, in-markets events. These are responses that you can provide by using your data to provide differentiation. Topics and behaviors. Our friends down in Chicago, Joel and the team at Scranton, they track a lot of good behavioral and topical information. Maybe another mechanism that you can explain to an advertiser and through data is through segmentation. You can hone in on topics. All these marketing automation tools that are out there, all these fancy technologies that everybody's looking to do and use are driven by a knowledge of people's behaviors and interests. Well, a lot of you already have that in place through your email systems or through your website behavioral data, and you need to be explaining that targeting capability in your responses. So whether it's topical interests or whether it's product interests or website versus mobile, you have all this data, and the visual representation of that can be a great asset to you. Okay, differentiated leads. So again, we're going down the list of examples of things that you got in an RFP where you might have glossed it over as opposed to using them as an opportunity to present differentiation. Okay, demographic data. So this is, again, we'll work with our friends here at Chief Executive. When you look at leads, you have collected a lot of information. Most of you have through your magazines, through your BPA audited magazines in many cases, collected a lot of profile information about people. But you've also been gathering behavioral data. So information about what people subscribe to, what they open, you know, what things that they registered for, their click behavior, and also topical interests. So the articles that people read, the topics they're interested in, the events they attend, the sessions they're at, live events, if it's a trade show, et cetera. And the question is how are you turning that around to be an asset? And does the agency or those groups even know? Well, a lot of times, a lot of these programs came for lead requests. So how many leads do you guarantee? What kind of information do you provide about leads? Hopefully these are common words that you've seen, and the ability to access all that data from the very different engagements, again, is a unique strategy for you. So when we look at this profile, we might say, hey, a traditional lead might have some basic information, but an enhanced lead might provide all of this data. So we can hone in on, at a more deeper level, lead level information that no one else can. And so this access to this more integrated and deep profile is something that visually you want to represent to differentiate yourself between the average lead versus a more an enhanced lead that you can get through you. Also, I always say this, anytime you're going to do an RFP response or even a sales call for that matter, make sure you go in and do research about that company, that advertiser, as well as any known individuals there, because especially in B2B, a lot of your advertisers are also your readers and subscribers, and the ability to present back to them their own behavior, their own clicks, their own opens, their own reads, their own subscriptions in a very detailed process demonstrates your ability to differentiate lead programs and the amount of data that you can provide just through your own representation. So I always say, don't forget to go in and remember that most of your advertisers, a great many of them, because of the nature of your vertical, are also in your database. So don't be afraid to show them the data that you're already collecting on them as proof of your value in enhancing leads. Okay, a couple more here in the last 7 or 8 minutes. Let's talk about added value. Okay, so obviously added value is the clever way of saying that they want you to give them a bunch of free stuff for the pleasure of them paying for some other stuff that they're probably going to ask you for a discount on anyway. Okay, so this concept of coming up with a more creative added value strategy, I think, can provide a differentiation. For example, a lot of them that I saw were just simply like, will you give us a free ad? Or will you run a free page, or a free this, or some free product, so, or a free banner ad, or something that just seemed very non-thoughtful. Although I understand it, it just seems not very thought out, especially when you guys have so many more creative ideas. So let's start thinking about added value, which you know you have to provide. I'm not saying you can't, but start thinking about moving beyond just thinking of free placement. I mean, maybe there's additional lead retargeting. One of my customers said that they always look at retargeting programs as a way for added value. You know, for your basic cost and your basic investment, you get X, but as added value, we'll provide a secondary retargeting program on this lead program as our added value. You know, that to me is a little bit more clever than just a placement. Enhanced leads, you know, again, we've been showing you lead data, and maybe as added value for a particular investment, we'll provide you with additional data on the leads we provide. Or sometimes an idea about data license rights. You know, we'll give you direct access to information as added value for services that you contract with us. We'll enhance them through added value. Okay, so for example, a lead retargeting program added value might say, look, our base proposal includes this, but as added value, we'll add in a secondary retargeting campaign to people within a particular campaign that have performed a particular action. So we'll use our other ideas beyond just simply product placement as retargeting strategies. Or similarly, maybe we go back to this lead slide, you know, maybe for the basic lead information, you get the first couple of buckets, you get demographic and behavioral product subscription data, but as added value, we'll provide you with some contextual information on your leads for X amount of spend or X amount of commitment or X amount of what have you. So again, we're not acknowledging the fact that there's an expectation in these RFPs for added value. What we're trying to do is compel you to think beyond placement, if that makes sense. Okay, lastly, another idea, one of our customers is a really sharp, great group of people out at Meister Media. One of the ideas that they might have or deploy is, maybe it's access to data, it's a data license rights, or it's data exchange of information. So maybe we'll provide you with some special insight or some special information that no one else can get, or unique insights based on a particular commitment that you make as an advertiser. So again, the main point we just wanted to make on added value is to step beyond just giving away traditional product placement and ask, do you have something creative from the information that you have that differentiates you from the next guy who's responding to the RFP who puts, I'll give you a quarter-page ad in next month's issue. So again, think about that as a separate idea, okay? So let me give you the bonus. The last door, I want to talk to you a little bit about the cover letter, okay? So we've talked about 5 ideas of how you go into an RFP. You mine for words of differentiation, and you use your data to provide them with some unique insight. But let's talk a little bit about the companion to that, right? Your RFP response, a lot of it, as we said, a lot of it is just you kind of forcing in data, answers to questions, but making sure that in your RFP response, you've got a couple of things. So this advice was given to me to one of the best salespeople I know in this industry. So I'll take it as gospel too. Talking a little bit about how he positions audience as a new idea within his letter. So for example, my cover note to the RFP starts with succinctly and boldly explaining audience capabilities. You still want to talk about unduplicated quantity, in other words, how well you've done to clean up your list, but he always suggests avoiding the word database because it sounds too technical, and the agency buyer probably doesn't understand what it means anyway. It talked about focus on sophisticated targeting capabilities as a good keyword for what agencies are looking for. Also focused around emphasizing the entire media plan, again, focused on audience marketing. So, audience is an acceptable word. Database may not be an acceptable word, but certainly audience is something that people recognize as a broader issue than the word subscribers. And then lastly, like we kind of talked about, making sure that you're hitting the keywords and those open-ended points that they gave you in the RFP in order to differentiate. I'll show you that in a minute. He also talked about a couple of strategic attachments, always to make sure that you have a custom PDF that really illustrates that audience program. So, think about what I showed you with Rhonda, the visual representation, because again, the words, especially if they have 10 different people bidding on it, may become just words. But the images are things that can be associated with you and your brand and your data that will differentiate. And again, lastly, using a slide, some visuals. I think I showed you some of those Venn diagrams or some of those query searches that hone in on the sophistication that you have on your ability to pull out very targeted audiences. So, and again, I know this is a lot of words on the screen, and if you're interested, you can download this, but I'm just, and use it for your own edification, but here's an example of, maybe a cover letter excerpt that really points out what we were just talking about. So, we're excited to be considered. We answered your requisite responses, but here's our key areas of differentiation. These are the 5 things that we just discussed: move beyond the printed page, leverage our influence in the industry, etc. So, you want to make sure that you have consistency across how you respond to the RFP all the way through to the way you summarize it. Okay, so our key points. Number 1, RFP. Pricing is the P. Pricing, proposal, partnership, pain, or pleasure. I think depending on the circumstances and depending on who gave it to you, you may react differently. My goal is that you look at it as opportunity and that you don't mail in your responses. Even though most painful RFP, you're still representing all of us in the industry as a response to these requests, and you hand opportunities for differentiation for you to do something that positions you and us as an industry as unique. Use visuals to educate. You're introducing new ideas that a lot of people may not understand, and in many ways those visuals can tie it all together. And lastly, when you summarize it, make sure in your response you're drawing attention through your cover letters to those unique attributes. Have you demonstrated, you know, if 80% of the RFP is standard response, have you focused your energies on time on that 20% that allows you to really differentiate? So anyway, so those are the key topics. I will forward and make available this presentation. There's a couple of questions if you guys want to hang on. If you need to drop off, that's great. There's a couple of fun questions on here. You know, I think one of them comes a little bit from the opportunity of displaying your total reach or your total audience or your total images of what you have available, even though the request might be fairly simple. So some RFPs might just be print only, and it's really a very narrow request. So is there value in positioning yourself beyond just responding to the RFP? And you know, I'm a big believer that that you know, you're always at any point in time, no matter what you're talking about, especially in the sales and advertising conversation, you're planting the seed for the next sale. So I think there is probably a little bit of extra work that's worthwhile to make sure that you're answering any questions as concisely as possible, but providing additional consideration for the future, because they may not have thought about asking you these questions this time, but if next time they see these responses, they might say, oh, I didn't realize you did that. That's not the scope with this particular response, but next time we'll, you know, we have you as a consideration. So I always recommend over-answering, especially when it comes to an opportunity to provide yourself with differentiation. You know, I think the comment before a couple of times was about, you know, the reason why templates exist. I think we all know, and I know it sounded harsh of saying that we were lazy or that they're lazy of doing them. I mean, obviously, they're looking for consistency. One of my customers recommended they tried to seed the advertiser or the agency with additional questions for the future. The customer said one medium-sized agency, they said, here's 10 questions that you should be asking on all of your future RFPs, because there's a lot of capability available that maybe you didn't know about. So another suggestion to kind of get solely out of the RFP template strategy is to educate upstream on the kinds of information that you have maybe for the future. So anyway, there's a lot going on here. There's a lot of things to consider. What I hope you take away from this is when we get RFPs, that you think of them at least as opportunities, as proposals, as requests for partnerships, and dig into the details of it. And when opportunity presents itself, as a publisher, use the data and information that you have to create for yourself a compelling advantage. Again, thanks everybody for coming. Those of you that want the recording, you can have it. It will be come up in the response. And good selling to everybody. And if you want to reach out with me on LinkedIn or you want further information, let me know. If not, we'll see you guys all again next month. Take care, and thanks again for coming.